welcome to the Luke Lunchtime Takeaway. Week by week, we're following Jesus on his journey through Luke's Gospel to his cross, his death, and his resurrection. And I want to tell you a story today in Luke chapter 10 about a clever lawyer who came to Jesus and challenged him with a big question. This is the question. Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Like a lot of people, he thought he could do enough good religious things to please God by his own actions, by his own religious good works. Now, Jesus humours him by asking him a couple of questions. What do you think the law actually says? And he replies by quoting the law. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbour as yourself. Good, said Jesus. Spot on. Do this and you will live. The problem is that none of us ever do. And what Jesus wants us to understand in this story that he's about to tell is that the true wonder of having a relationship with God is never on the basis of our good works, the religious things we do to please God. It is always on the basis of God's grace. And to prove that, he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, a parable, a picture of his kingdom. And it's a story with a completely different point to what you might imagine. It's not a story about being nice do-gooders. It's a story about receiving God's grace. So there was a man. He was travelling down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he was jumped on by robbers, and they stripped off his clothes, and they took his money, and they beat him up, and they left him for dead at the side of the road. Now, think about this. When someone has lost their clothes, you can't really tell what culture they come from. Our clothes reveal what country, what nation we are, don't they? And that's very important to the story. Hang on to that fact. The first person to come down the road is a priest. He's been up at the temple in Jerusalem, fulfilling his responsibilities as one of the chosen priests, and now he's going home to his village, and he has had to keep himself religiously clean to be able to work in the temple. And what that means is that there were certain things that you didn't touch. You didn't go into the home of a foreigner, because the Jewish people considered foreigners to be unclean. And you certainly didn't touch a dead body. Now that's very important for the story, because he sees this man and he's not sure whether he's dead or alive. First of all, maybe he's foreign. And if I go to help him, he's not wearing any clothes, his clothes have been stolen. Maybe I'm going to make myself unclean by helping a foreigner. And secondly, I can go and feel for a pulse to see if he's alive. But what if he's dead? What am I going to do then? I've touched a dead body. I can't do my job as a priest in the temple. I'll have to go and make myself clean, and it will take days for that to happen. So Jesus tells us, when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Now behind him comes a Levite. The Levites were not priests, but they were kind of officials in the temple who had lots of responsibilities to help the priests in all that they had to do. And therefore, the same rules apply to them. And so he has seen his boss going down the hill. He's noticed him stopping and looking at this body and passing by on the other side. And now the Levite thinks, well, I better not show up my boss. If he passed him by, I better do the same thing. Now, who's coming next? You've already got this sense of anticipation as Jesus is telling the story. Who comes next? A Samaritan. Now, that was radical. The Samaritans, the people of Samaria, sort of lived between Judah in the south and Galilee in the north, and they were treated by the Jewish people as sort of half foreign and unclean. They had rebelled against God, they turned to idols, and they were a mixture of Jewish people and foreign blood, all married in together. And so this comes as a big shock. The Samaritan is the hero in the story. Listen to the story. A Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was. And when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him. Now, those are very important words. Imagine there's an Ulster Protestant on the streets of Belfast and he gets beaten up by some thugs and he's sort of lying on the pavement. And along comes Jerry Adams, a Republican, and he picks him up and dusts him down and helps him, sort out his wounds and calls for an ambulance and makes sure that he gets on his way to hospital. That's how radical this picture is that Jesus is telling in this story. Never mind the risks. This Samaritan went to the man, bound up his wounds. He took some oil and wine and poured it into the wounds as a sort of primitive antiseptic. And then he put him on his animal and he took him to an inn. He stayed the night at the inn and he paid the bill. The next day, he took out 2 denarii, that's about 2 days' wages, and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." What is this story telling us? Well, Jesus is answering the clever lawyer. And what he's saying is this: look at the 2 people in the story who tried to keep the laws of the temple. Actually, what they did was they forced themselves into breaking the law. They didn't love their neighbour. If you want to make yourself right with God by keeping your nose clean and trying to keep every religious law, you will fail, for you are a sinner. You cannot keep everything that the law demands. Instead, every single one of us needs the message that is going on, the action that's actually going on inside this story. Jesus is using the Samaritan as a picture of himself. Jesus is the Samaritan coming to us in our need and rescuing us. He comes where we are and he has compassion on us. We have to admit that our lives are broken. We are moral failures. We are sinners. We need a rescuer. We need a redeemer. We are, as it were, beaten up at the side of the road, and only he can change that situation. We need God's grace. We need God's favor, God's mercy, God's compassion. And that is what God has given to us in Jesus, his Son, in his coming, his life, his death, and his resurrection. And there's a hint here about how Jesus pays the price for us. He pays the ransom price to set us free. He goes to the inn and he pays 2 days' wages for the man so that he can be cared for while he recovers. But he also says, when I come back, I will pay the rest. And that's like a little sort of note that, Jesus in his first coming at his cross has paid the price for our salvation. And when he comes back at the final day, he will do away with sin. He will do away with evil. He will do away with the curse and death and suffering and make everything new. And then it will be complete redemption, complete salvation. This is a story that is completely shaped by God's grace. Now, any Christian who's been touched by God's grace cannot keep that to ourselves, can we? We have to share it with other people. Grace that flows into our lives must flow out of our lives into the lives of others around us. So we must be wanting to provide a refuge for the homeless and to help them get settled and to support them getting back into life. We want to welcome the refugee. We want to help the addict to get clean. And to have the support they need and the treatment to start a new life. We want to listen to the lonely and the depressed and the grieving. We want to provide help for those who are in debt. And most of all, we have a message of forgiveness. We have a message of a new beginning. And we want everyone to hear that message and come to faith in Jesus. That's why I make these videos week by week. That's what we stand for as a church. And we'd love you to know more. If you'd like to read the whole of Luke's Gospel, we'd love to give you a copy free. If you live in or near Didcot, just send us a copy of your name and address by email. The email's on the screen, and we'll be happy to deliver you a free copy of Luke's Gospel. And I'll be back next week. I look forward to seeing you then.